Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Meredith Eastman, and I'm the pre-rulemaking task lead at Patel. Before we begin, I'd like to review just a few housekeeping issues. First, this meeting is being recorded. And I'd like to encourage you to use the Q&A feature in WebEx to submit questions throughout the presentation. We will address them during the question and answer period following the demonstration. Be sure to submit your question to all panelists to make sure that we're able to see it. And during the Q&A period, you also have the option of virtually raising your hand to ask a question, and we will individually unmute your line. Aside from that, all other lines are going to be muted for this presentation. And I will be covering a lot of the same information that I reviewed during the webinar for submitters that was held back in February, but I will be adding a few additional sort of tips and tricks and pointers. So those of you who attended that session hopefully won't be completely bored. So as an overview of what I'll be covering today, I'm going to start by describing what CMS MERIT is and some of its defining features. Then I'm going to share my screen and I'll demonstrate some of the features and functionality of the new tool. After I finish showing off CMS MERIT, I will review some help resources that are available to you as you work on submitting your measures. And we'll also have some time for questions at the end. So what is CMS MERIT? CMS MERIT, the full name, Measures Under Consideration Entry and Review Information Tool, is the tool for measure developers to submit their clinical quality measures for consideration by CMS. It replaces JIRA, used in years past, and it replaces last year's use of the word template. Measures that you'd like to submit for the 2021 MUC list must come through CMS MERIT. In addition to being the tool to submit information about measures, CMS MERIT also facilitates searches of measures from current and previous years, and it also structures the workflow for CMS review of measures submitted to the MUC list. In today's demonstration, I'll be focusing on CMS MERIT from the submitter's perspective. So CMS MERIT offers several features that will improve the MUC list entry and review process. We have an automatic completeness check for required measure information. We have the ability to save partial information and return later to finish your submission. We have the ability to track your submission throughout the review process. And MERIT does all of this in an easy to navigate interface that incorporates elements of human-centered design. Throughout the tool, you'll see a red asterisk, which denotes fields that are mandatory. These fields will be used to enhance CMS's and the Measure Application Partnership's assessment of measures. You may notice that there are more of these required measure information fields in CMS MERIT than you've seen in previous years. These additional fields have been included to support CMS in addressing the U.S. Government Accountability Office recommendation regarding systematic measure assessment that aligns with CMS quality objectives. They help to standardize, streamline, and align required information for stakeholders and developers. They assist CMS in prioritizing measures for development, implementation, and continued development, and they enhance the existing endorsement and measure selection processes. So before I transition to the demonstration and share my screen and show off CMS MERIT, I just wanted to provide a reminder about how to ask questions during today's webinar. There are two options. You can put a question in the Q&A panel. Please be sure to select all panelists in the Ask field to make sure your question gets to the right place. The other option is to virtually raise your hand. When we get to the Q&A portion, we'll call on you and unmute your line so that you can ask your question. So with that overview, I will now turn to a demonstration of CMS MERIT. So give me one moment as I transition to sharing my screen. Okay. Here we are. This is the login page for CMS Merit. To get an account, you need to click the Request an Account button and complete the form that appears. Although CMS Merit is built on the same platform as the CMS Measures Inventory Tool, or CMIT, you must specifically request access to CMS Merit even if you already have a CMIT account. You'll use the same login information for both CMIT and Merit, but you must request access to Merit even if you already have a CMIT account. So I will go ahead and log in. And my password. And CMS Merit does require two-factor authentication. And so I'm using my Google Authenticator to provide the token code. And I'll press submit. There we go. So because I am not logging in for the first time, I'm taken directly to my submissions. You'll see I have two measures here that I've prepared ahead of time for the purposes of this demonstration. However, if I were logging in for the first time, I would see two large buttons about in the center of the page. One button would be to submit a new measure, and the other button would be to download a Word document that contains CS Merit fields for submission. If you'd like to, you can download this template. It's also available from the login screen without even having to log in. You can populate it to your satisfaction and then copy and paste that information into CMS Merit. And again, that's available from the first time you log in on the login screen and after you log in the first time. So there are a couple of ways I can start a measure submission. I can click that big button that would be here the first time I log in, or I can click Submit a New Measure in the upper right-hand corner here. But rather than start a new measure, I'm actually going to open up a measure that I've created previously for the purposes of this demonstration. Here are my measures, and I'm interested in demonstration measure B, so that's what I will click on. And we can see that I'm on this measure because the title is right here. And this, once I click edit to go back in and change information that I'd submitted previously, this is actually what you would see if you were submitting a measure for the first time, but you'll see in this case, I've populated some of the fields for this demonstration. Before I move on, there's a couple of features that are used throughout the tool that I'd like to point out. First, as promised, we have the red asterisks for the required fields. And not only is there an asterisk next to many fields, there's also a question mark after each one. And if I put my cursor over it, you can see this hover over text, which provides instructions and details on what is being requested. It's good practice to review each of these hoverovers as you proceed through the tool. The hoverover text is also provided in that Word template. So the instructions are available in that Word template and also on screen as hoverover text. I did want to also mention character length and limits, unless otherwise noted. So we have a few otherwise noted cases here. Unless otherwise noted, the default character limit is 4,000 characters. And these text boxes here will actually expand as you enter text. There are a couple of ways you can navigate through CMS Merit. On this left navigation bar, you'll see the major sections of the tool. You can click to navigate between sections, skipping to the one that you want. However, I recommend that you be sure to hit the save button before you navigate away from your page. You do not want to navigate by clicking the back arrow in your browser without first clicking save. You risk losing information on that page. So the recommendation is to press save frequently and navigate through the left navigation bar rather than using your browser buttons to navigate. I do encourage you to save often in CMS Merit to avoid losing any information. There is a 15-minute automatic inactivity logout. So if you are inactive for 15 minutes, you will automatically be logged out of your session and lose unsaved information. There is a warning about this though. So about 1 minute before the 15 minutes is up, you'll receive a warning asking if you want to continue your session, and that appears as a red banner at the top of the screen. So as you complete the required information in Merit, you'll see a green check appear next to section names where you have completed all required fields in a given section. And that's just a good progress check for you as you move forward. You'll see there are multiple question types in CMS Merit. So we have some open text fields, we have some checkboxes, there are drop downs, and also radio buttons. And there are some answers that generate additional questions for you to complete. So for example, I'm going to navigate to the characteristics section right now. Let's scroll down, and we see this question: is this measure in the CMS Measures Inventory Tool, or CMIT? If I had answered yes to this question, you'll see an additional question has popped up asking me to provide the CMIT ID for that measure. So again, I'll just toggle back and forth. So depending on the answers you provide, you may be required to answer additional questions. So now let's talk about attachments. You are encouraged to provide the measure information form or other methodological documents for your measure if the MIF is not available. You do have the opportunity to provide attachments in Merit. So I will go to the Attachments tab here. And I see I've already attached the MIF for this measure, but I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And I will add it again to show you how it's done. I'm just going to drag it. And you have the option of, as I just did, deleting. You can change the attachment and you can add comments about the files that you have attached. So let's say I've gone through each page and I have entered in all of the information I think is necessary. I think I'm ready to submit. So I'm going to go to the Review and Submit page. And I'm going to ask CMS Merit to verify that I've submitted all the required information. I'm going to press Check Submission for Errors. Oh, and it looks like I missed a field back on the first page. And I can see that there's a red triangle here, and there's also a link here telling me exactly what's missed. So I can get back to that field and complete that information either by clicking on this hyperlink text here or by clicking on the left navigation bar here. So let me go ahead and click this. And this is what I neglected to provide. So let me fill in this field. And I'll click Save. Great. Now I will go back to Review and Submit. My error check is complete. No errors have been found, so I know that I've completed all the required fields, and I will submit my measure. Great. So I have a notice that my submission is complete and that it's now under review. So let's spend a few minutes talking about what happens to this measure after I've submitted it. I'm going to go back to my submissions, and I'm going to actually go to another measure that I submitted earlier, and that's demonstration measure A. And this is sort of a nice submission status summary. I can see that this is the program that I submitted to right here. And this is where the measure is in the review process right now. So each measure undergoes first and second level measures manager review, then CMS review, and then a final accept reject decision is made for the MUC list. And you can actually expand this little workflow further by clicking on any one of these circles. So you can see this blue dot is telling me where I am in the process, and it shows me what's ahead. I'll click out of that. So let's say that I want to make a change to a measure that I submitted. This could be because a reviewer has gotten in touch with me and asked that I make this change, or because I noticed an error prior to the submission deadline, which is 8 p.m. Eastern on May 27th. So I will actually receive an email if someone has requested that I make a change via a comment. So here I am on my submissions, and I scroll down and I see here under the activity summary that there is indeed a comment for me to respond to. Perhaps what I've input for this measure is too similar to an existing measure, and I want to make sure that I differentiate my measure from that other measure. In order to make a change, I have to click this request change button here. And you can see there's a separate change request for each field. So the title is the one that is in question. So I will click change request here, and two boxes appear. One is for the new information, the new value, and the other is the reason for the change request. So for new value, I'm going to type in improved title, demonstration measure A. And then in reason for the change request, I will type measure manager request for more descriptive title. Then I'm going to go ahead and press submit change request over here on the right. A pop-up informs me that all change requests are subject to review and approval, and I'm going to go ahead and submit. Change request successful. So once I hit that button, the individual who requested the change will receive a notification, and then they'll be able to accept or reject the change and move the measure along to the next step in the review process. After I have made that change, I can also go back to the summary, and I can reply to the comment to close the loop. And I'll just say title revised per measure manager request. And I will add that comment. And optional, you can specify, in this case, it's the hospital outpatient reporting program. So I'm adding my comment. Save. Save. Okay, and so that will appear in the activity summary going forward. Let's say I wanted to take a look at what I submitted after I submitted it. There are a couple of ways you can do that. You can view full here, which will actually take you to the information that you submitted. Sort of you can page through and see as what you provided. There's another way to see what you submitted, and that is to export the Excel document that has a column representing each measure information field. And so you can download that and save it, and it will actually export everything that shows up under my submissions in one file. So before I end this tour of CMS Merit, I did want to share information about another feature, and that is the possibility of adding a co-submitter. So you can actually have multiple individuals working on a single measure submission. To request that a colleague be granted rights to edit your measure, you want to navigate to the About page, then go to Contact Us, and in your message, you want to give us the co-submitter's merit username and the title of the measure to which they should have submission rights. It's important here to note that the co-submitter must already have a CMS Merit account to be granted shared submission rights to the measure. I'll also note that you will not receive notification if your co-submitter is simultaneously working on your measure. So I would encourage you to coordinate with any co-submitter colleagues that you have to ensure that you are not overriding one another's changes in CMS Merit. So I am going to stop sharing and go back to the slide presentation to describe how you can get help if you need it as you're working on your measure. Okay, so we do have a quick start guide that is downloadable from the Merit login page, and that's a handy resource that's available to you and will cover all the topics that I've reviewed in today's session. Additionally, we encourage you to contact the Measures Management System support team at mmssupport@patel.org for questions about MUC list requirements as well as any technical issues with CMS Merit. And lastly, although it's not on this slide, I encourage you to visit the CMS pre-rulemaking website for information about this year's pre-rulemaking cycle. And that link is going in the chat. And with that, I think we can transition to the questions. Before I turn it over to Kate Buchanan to see if we've received any questions in the Q&A panel, I'm going to just display these instructions to remind you how to ask questions. So you can use the WebEx Q&A panel. Make sure to select all panelists. Or you can virtually raise your hand and we will unmute your line so that you can ask your question. So Kate, have we received any questions?
Yes, we have. Our first question is, can you please repeat the deadline for measure submissions?
Yes, excellent question, an important question. The deadline is Thursday, May 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern. And after that time, you will no longer have the functionality to submit a measure will no longer be available on the tool. So again, that's May 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. We have another question, which is there a limit to the number of attachments that can be uploaded? Are there limits to the file size or format of attachments? And then the last part is, are there document types that are not relevant to CMS or MAP that developers are discouraged from attaching to their merit submission?
That's a great question. As far as I know, there's not a limit to the number of attachments. For file types, I would recommend you limit your types to, the Word, the Office suite, or PDFs. And I think that the attachment feature is really to provide any supplemental information that you think would be helpful for CMS and the MAP to review and understand your measure. In addition to the measure information form, maybe there are charts and graphs that you want to put in a Word document and upload as attachments, or any sort of detailed methodological documents.
Great. Thank you. And we do have some more questions in, but just wanted to remind people that you can also raise your hand if you would like to. Once you raise your hand, we will unmute your line and you can ask your question. So the next question we have is a MIF template available for download?
Great question. Yes, there is. Right on the attachments page, there is the MIF template available to download, a blank template right on that page. I think it's also available on the Blueprint website, but there is one actually in CMS Merit that you can download and complete and then upload once you're done.
Great. And I am looking through to see if we have any other questions.
And I will say sorry, Kate, just for questions about sort of the intent behind some of the fields or the meaning of the questions, I encourage you to refer to that hover over text on the required fields or on all the fields question mark little icon there. That really provides some good instructions on what types of information we're asking for. And that information and that guidance is also provided in the Word template. If you have additional questions after sort of reviewing that guidance, you can always reach out to us for additional clarification.
Great, thank you. I wanted to check, I believe that you may have already addressed this, but just wanted to double check of you can upload multiple attachments to CMS MERIT. Just wanted to confirm that.
Yes, you can upload multiple attachments.
Great. And just as a final reminder to people, please feel free to type something in the Q&A panel. If you cannot see the Q&A panel, it is in the bottom right, the three dots. You click on that, and you can get to the Q&A panel. And the other thing is you can also raise your hand, and we can open up your line. So it looks like we are slowing down on questions, but do want to give people an opportunity to type anything or raise their hand if they have any additional questions. And Meredith, I am not seeing any additional questions, so I will turn it back to you.
Okay, great. So but just a reminder that Quick Start Guide is available from the login page. You can download the Word template with that hover over guidance already in it for additional guidance. And then you can always reach out to us. So there's multiple ways to get help, and I encourage you to visit those resources as you get started in working on your measures using the new tool, which we're very excited about. So before I let everyone go today, I did just want to mention another tool that is available on the CMIT platform, and that is the De Novo Measure Scan tool, or the DNMS. This tool is particularly helpful during the information gathering phase of measure development. The DNMS enables users to start an environmental scan using concepts to build a new measure. It uses artificial intelligence and semantic graphs to identify and prioritize the most relevant literature. And it has a higher precision and recall than what you may have with a typical keyword search, which reduces the time you need for information gathering. It is freely available to CMIT account holders. So this is, again, available on the CMIT platform and may be of use to you as you are developing your measures. And if you're interested in learning more, there are quick start guides available within the tool. And I would also encourage you to check out an info session we did back in January about the information gathering phase of measure development that featured a demonstration of the De Novo Measure Scan tool. And we are putting a link to that recording in the chat. And I'm seeing we actually have some late breaking questions, so I will address those. So the change request function, you cannot initiate changes to your measure submission after the 27th. If you received a request from the measure manager or a CMS reviewer to make changes, then you'll be able to make that change, but you will not be able to initiate any changes after the 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern. And with that, I think we can end it here. I thank you all so much for your attention, and I hope that you have a good experience using CMS Merit. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon.